So it's my pleasure and privilege to extend a warm welcome to our chief guest and the author of the book, as well as those persons who come over here. Welcome you, all persons gathered here today for this auspicious occasion. We are indeed honored to have in our midst a distinguished author and an IRS officer. He was very popular in Kerala context as an economist and an IRS officer, functioned in Reserve Bank of India and as well as functioned as Income Tax Commissioner, Tamil Nadu. So very recently only I learned that he is the brother of Nalini Nettoyes, and now he is functioning as the private secretary to our Honorable Chief Minister of Kerala. So I have gone through the work, and which gave me an impression that I could discern the power of word that has been used in this book. That's very important. Very simple style of presentation, very cognate and compact style of presentation. That is the peculiarity that I could see while going through this work he has written, which sparked my imagination and stirred my emotions in a sense, which even facilitated me to read a lot or to understand or to study on Indian federalism. Whether he himself, in the 12th chapter of the book, which I found very interesting, that he has been trying to frame some questions and get answers to these questions. And he has logically given answers to some of the questions by questions he has, of course, framed. Firstly, what is the evolution of Indian federalism, why this evolved, and historically, in a historical context, he has been explaining why this federalism has evolved, and trying to get an answer to the various historical stages by which the federalism has evolved. Secondly, whether this federalism is very ideal for a vast democratic country like ours, with complexities of cultures and civilizations and different sets of people, the vastness of the country, plus that the complexity that exists in this country, which warranted the federalism. And generally, this is an idea which generally presupposes. But he has been trying to critically analyze it, whether it is feasible for India, this federalism is feasible for India or not. That's another important question that he posed, and he is trying to get answer to this question. And third, fourth, and fifth, and has federalism itself is a problem that we need to understand through the work he has been trying to get answer to the question whether federalism itself is a solution. It's a problem, whether it is a problem to our country, and through the experiences as a person who worked in the administrative, highest ranking administration, Indian Administrative Service in the Revenue Department, he has his own experiences, that ground realities very well with regard to the working of the federal system that India has, of course, and whether it is successful for the empowerment of the masses of India. And these are some of the questions he tried to pose into and get answers to these questions. So I was so much impressed by reading this book, and I will recommend this book for maximum viewers as far as in my area is concerned, or to whom I have in touch with, I will recommend that book. That's my personal opinion. But anyway, we are so much happy for having with us such a kind of personality, a person having very simplicity in his outlook as well as views and dealings So I heard from some other persons, and when I invited him, I had some chance of interacting with some person to whom they have some idea about this person. They told that he is very, very efficient and as well as successful in dealing the students and disseminating the knowledge in a very, very simple manner. That's, you will experience it. Now you will experience it. I, in the department of, in the name of the Department of History, I wholeheartedly welcome, sir. And I request you to make a brief presentation of the content of your book, and we can have interactions. Thank you very much.
Respected head of the department, teachers, dear students and researchers, I am indeed privileged and honored for having got an opportunity to speak to the researchers in the Department of History in the Kerala University. As researchers and students of history, you will be having your own ideas about how the polity of India evolved, how the polity of the state in which we live evolved, how the world's polity evolved, what are the twists and turns. I am only an observer, and to tell you frankly, how I started thinking about this book is something. I was encouraged by a few friends, that's one story. Since HOD has raised the bar that I will be giving a very good talk, I do not know. I leave it to you to decide. Now, I was basically concentrating on research related to India's union state fiscal relations, how the financial relations between union and the state are there as it is today. There are asymmetries, there are problems like imbalances in expenditure and revenue. And finally, economists will keep on arguing that there has to be more powers to the states. Some will argue that the union has to keep its powers. Now, why these have come to this? To look at that, I felt that a graphical interpretation of the expenditure and revenue patterns, taxing powers, they had their own inherent limitations and they were not giving the answers. To look into that, you have to cross disciplines and tread into the path of other disciplines in which you are no expert, but you have to go and wander. And that walk has been quite interesting. Whether in the course of my walk, whether I have destroyed the purity of the subjects in which you are an expert, you kindly tell me frankly. Now I will get into the topic. India's federal setup, a journey through 7 decades. In the book, I have given some references. Let me admit frankly that I have missed out many, including Rajini Kothari, Alexander Ravik, etc., which I will try to make up in another edition if it works. Now, what is India's federalism right now? Whether it is federal or not, we'll come to that. Is it an article of faith? Indian Constitution's preamble does not say we are a federation. As you all know, the 1935 Act had the explicit word federation. But that was not the federation a democratic nation has envisaged. That was to be a federation of the British dominions, the British provinces and the 597 princely states who were given the freedom to join the federation. And Dr. Ambedkar, in his Arkale Memorial Lecture, which is available on the web for a free download, made a big critique of the kind of federation the 1935 Act had envisaged. That essay is called Freedom versus Federation by Dr. Ambedkar in 1939. Now, coming to the meandering course of the last century, what was to be the shape of the independent India? This set the thinking in the early 20th century And 1916, before that, the Congress, the extremists and the moderates, the Surat Conference, the split unit, the Tilak, Gokhale, Feroz Shah Mehta on side. I mean, I'm not going into all that. By the time 1916, there was the Lucknow Pact of reached between Congress and the All India Muslim League. That was where the independent India was envisaged as extremely federal, with the union or the federal government having limited powers and vast powers going to the provinces. There was another underlying angle to that. We needed Hindu-Muslim unity, and to assure the minorities that the independent Indian Raj will not be a Hindu Raj or an overwhelming majority Raj, the Muslim League and the Congress had to come united. That was we also sometimes in colloquial parlance call it the Tilak Jinnah Pact. So, the Lucknow Pact of 1916 conceived an extremely federal India with limited powers for the union and vast powers for the states. It also considered something called separate electorates for the Muslims and other minority communities. But the journey was not a straight journey. Journey took twists and turns. As Granville Austin famously said, India's federalism or unitarism, we decide by the pendulum method. We oscillate to the one extreme, we come to the middle, we oscillate to the other extreme. We have been oscillating. Then comes, as you know, the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms of 1919, a limited diarchy with an overarching powerful center and little powers to the provinces. The diarchy meant that the provinces will get certain independent sources of revenue and certain transferred subjects and reserved subjects kept for the governor. Governor means the nominee of the Governor General and the Secretary of the State, not at all responsible. So the limited suffrage and the legislative assemblies, they were given responsibilities, the ministries were given responsibilities on certain subjects. The joke of it is that irrigation was a reserved subject and agriculture was a transferred subject. So you had agriculture ministers without irrigation under their control. I mean, such was the moth-eaten diarchy you had to. The patent is from Jinnah, the moth-eaten Pakistan, the moth-eaten division of powers you had. This was a far cry from the Lucknow Pact. Then the Montagu-Chelmsford reforms was to have been reviewed 10 years later. Then John Simon came. We all know the Simon Go Back slogans, it had no Indian member in it. So, but Reginald Coupland made a succinct remark in Constitutional Problem of India written in 1944 that Simon Commission is an excellent piece in a library. It was confined to that. But to give it also the credit, it stated that an independent India or India to move ahead has to be federal and not unitary. When the nationalist sentiment ran very high, Lord Birkenhead, the Secretary of State, challenged, can you frame the roadmap which is acceptable to all sections of your country? That challenge was taken up by the all-party conference after the 1927, if I am not mistaken, after the 1927 Congress session at Madras. The Motilal Nehru Committee was set up. Tej Bahadur Sapru, Ali Imam, Subhash Chandra Bose, I think Jawaharlal Nehru later joined as the member secretary. I may be missing out names. Motilal Nehru Committee report also envisaged a federal India, but much less a federal India than Lucknow Congress Pact had envisaged. It had a long union list, it had a comparatively smaller state list and a dual list, a concurrent list. Center, of course, had overarching powers, but states were also given powers. Some kind of a division of powers was envisaged in Motilal Nehru Committee report. Motilal Nehru Committee report did not see the light of the day because the committee rejected the concept of separate electorates for Hindus and Muslims. The All India Muslim League rejected the report. So that report. So from extreme federalism, we came to the 1919 Pact and then Motilal Nehru Committee report, which was not successful. After that, we had 3 rounds of roundtable conferences where distribution of taxes was discussed. There also, a roundtable separately on federalism was held. So how federal we are to be was discussed there. Then comes the White Paper of 1933 and the Government of India Act of 1935, where we envisaged a federation of the British provinces and the princely states. The princely states, the federation never came to being at the All India level. At the state level, some initiatives were taken at the provinces level. British province, I will come to that in a moment. Then we had the turbulent 1940s, the failed Cripps mission, etc., etc. Then the last attempt at having a completely federal setup with a loose center union and a powerful, with lot of powers for the provinces, was that the recommendations of the report of the Cabinet Mission. Cabinet Mission included Stafford Cripps, Pethick Lawrence and A.V. Alexander. They considered partition an unrealistic idea. Maulana Azad also supported them. His book, later published much after his death, India Wins Freedom, there are mentioned about all this. Cabinet Mission envisaged the country as a highly federal country because the two-nation theory was not accepted. The union will have power only on 3 subjects: defense, telecommunications, and external affairs. I wonder, not even currency was supposed to be the union subject. I do not know, but Kuldeep Nair writes that currency was to be union subject. I am not exactly sure, you must be having more information. But to my best of knowledge, currency was also not a union subject. Twists and turns happened, two-nation theory, the Constituent Assembly, the direct action, everything happened. And finally, when partition became a reality, the framers of the Constitution, the Union Powers Committee's resolution itself underwent a change. The first resolution of the Union Powers Committee, if you see, residuary powers were to be with the states. You know the residuary powers, it is going above the head. The 7th schedule of the Indian Constitution has 3 lists. The Union list, in which the power exclusively is with the Union. The state list, where the power is substantially with the states, not exclusively, because there are 2 articles, Article 249, if Rajya Sabha passes a resolution with 2/3 majority, Union can legislate on a state subject. Or when 2 states join together and request the Union under Article 252, Union can legislate. During the emergency, under Article 352, if it is declared, Union can again legislate on the state subject. So substantially states are sovereign in their area, but with caveats. There is an expanding concurrent list also. Concurrent list keeps expanding. Union and center both can legislate, but if there is a union legislation, if a union legislation comes, even when a state legislation is providing, the union legislation will take precedence over the state legislation. Unless and until the state gets precedence assent for that particular legislation. Even then, if union amends it, it goes. So that is the state of the Constitution. Whereas the Union Powers Committee of the Indian Constitution, after partition, said that the residuary powers will also remain with the Union. That is the first step towards federalism becoming truncated and quasi-federal. India is not the only country where residuary powers are with the Union. Canada, which is a federal setup, the residuary powers are with the federal government. Australia, the reverse is true. So, residuary powers are with the states. Now, the Union Powers Committee, after the Cabinet Mission became a historical piece after the partition, our strict or tight mold federalism went with the winds. Now the first question that comes to mind is, in a multilingual, a multicultural country, can we do away with federal principles and go for a unitary setup? No was the answer from none other than Jawaharlal Nehru, who favored a strong center. He was chairman of the Union Powers Committee. If you go through the Constituent Assembly debates, especially the volume 9 coming to the governor's role and all, H.V. Kamath, Ramasamy Mudaliar, these people arguing for more federal powers. Alladi Krishnaswamy Iyengar, N.V. Gopalaswamy Iyengar, Jawaharlal Nehru and Dr. Ambedkar arguing on the other side. I mean, you can see that. Now, the constitution ultimately settled for something where there are streaks of federalism with overarching unitary features. Right or wrong, that is the reality. You have states list, powers for the state well defined, but union can override the state administration when it feels that the state's administration cannot be run in accordance with the constitutional principles. That is, according to my submission, the single striking unitary provision in the Indian Constitution, Article 356. But Ambedkar agreed with the member of the Constituent Assembly that this will remain a dead letter. Dead letter is not originally from Ambedkar. I think he agreed with another member. I will get his name. He agreed that it will be a dead letter. So that was a stark unitary feature. Now, can you call the Constitution unitary because of that? No. There is another stark federal feature also in the Constitution. If you go back to the revenue expenditure powers, education, health, much of the social sector spending is with the states, the obligations. Education has gone to the concurrent list, but still substantial expenditure obligations are with the states. Come to the revenue side. Personal income tax, the corporation tax, the customs duty, all are with the center. The inelastic sources like sales tax and others came to the states. Now GST is another commodity which has come into being. I will mention a few words, few things before concluding. So states were left with limited revenue sources and vast expenditure obligations. This resulted in something called a vertical imbalance. How do you solve it? One method to solve it is to give grants to the states. Grants are nothing but gratis, the grantor and the receiver. The receiver is always at a lower side. India's constitution has a very strong federal article feature, as can be seen from Article 280. I was talking about 356 on one side, now I come to 280 on the other side. Every 5 years or earlier if there is need, President shall constitute a finance commission, and that commission shall make recommendations to the President on how the taxes collected by the union are to be distributed to the states. A part of the taxes collected by the union have to be constitutionally mandated to be distributed among the states. This is not a gratis, this is not a favor of any ruling party or any political party or any dispensation. It's a constitutional right of the states. Now, local governments have also got a constitutional status, but they are still at the beck and call of the state governments. What the states are vis-a-vis the central, local governments are not vis-a-vis the states. Anyway, Article 280 empowers the states to get a share of the taxes collected by the center. This is a stark federal feature. Now, come to another question. Is this feature fully federal? Center appoints the finance commission. The members are appointed by the center. States are not consulted. The givens of the states. Now, even the recommendations of the finance commission, the president can accept or reject. Who is president to accept or reject? President is nothing but union cabinet. Article 74, as you know, president is bound by the advice of the union cabinet. The maximum he can do after the 44th Amendment of 1978 is that, 79, is that president can once return the proposal, if sent back, he has to accept it. He is bound to accept it. So, if a finance commission as a neutral body, after hearing the union and the states, recommends 40% share to the states. If the Union Cabinet decides that it should be 45 or 35, that's the end of the story. So that is again a unitary element coming into that federal feature. But what is written in the Constitution is not everything. How it is put to work is everything. Granville Austin's second book is Working a Democratic Constitution. No recommendation of the Finance Commission from 1952 till 2020 with regard to the share of the taxes has been rejected by the Union. Always it has been accepted. That is the credibility of the federal feature of the Constitution. So now I have confused enough by saying that whether the Constitution is unitary or federal, we can't say. Because we have unitary features and we have federal features, and the federal features there are unitary elements, but while working, the unitary features have been numbed. They have been put to euthanasia and federal features have come to the top. So, now are we quasi-federal to say as per K.C. Beer's notion? Charles Henry Alexandrovich, who wrote the book, unfortunately I have not referred the book here. Charles C.H. Alexandrovich, he was head of the Department of Law in Madras University. Alexandrovich, VICZ. Constitutional Development in India. He stops with 1958. He objects to the word quasi-federal. He says, Indian Constitution is federal only. Unitary features prop up, but they go inside the shell also. During emergency, they prop up, otherwise they go inside. Is that true? Many times, the federal expectations of Article 356 have been belied. Was it a dead letter? You know, first time Article 356 was applied in India in the state of Punjab when differences regarding formation of a cabinet arose between the High Command of the ruling party at the center and Gopi Chand Bhargava, the Chief Minister of Punjab. That was when he was asked to resign and President's rule was imposed. If you go through Granville Austin's Democratic Constitution, Rajendra Prasad objected but he had to yield. Then comes PEPSU, the Punjab and East Patiala States Union, which is no longer in existence, where a non-Congress government was formed. That government was dismissed under Article 356. But there were other issues there. Third time was when in Andhra Pradesh, T. Prakasham's government, the Congress government, fell after facing a defeat in the assembly. The opposition groups were ready to form a government. Without allowing that, the center, the union government, based on the recommendation of the governor, imposed President's rule under Article 356. Kerala of 1959, I am not going through. 118 times Article 356 have been invoked. To quote Subhash Kashyap, every year, at least twice, the constitutional machinery fails in some state or the other. That was the sorry state of affairs. Now, does that happen often? No. This is because the checks and balances in our constitution and the S.R. Bommai's case in 1994 held that the presidential proclamation is subject to limited judicial review. S.R. Bommai was the Janata Dal Chief Minister of Karnataka in 1988-89. There were some defections from the ruling party, and Governor P. Venkatasubbaiah, who was a reputed politician and a long-time congressman, without allowing S.R. Bommai to prove his majority on the floor of the Legislative Assembly, recommended President's rule. Bommai, when the litigation took a turn, and finally it was said that a majority has to be tested on the floor of the House and not on the lawns of the Raj Bhavan. Not in so many words, but it was said like that. Previously head counts were taken in Raj Bhavan and ministries were made and unmade. Now, S.R. Bommai's case was another federal landmark in the India's journey through 7 decades. After that, the use or overuse, I will not use the word misuse, of Article 356 has dramatically come down. In 1997 and 98, twice, President K.R. Narayanan returned proposals of the Union Cabinet to impose President's rule in Bihar and Uttar Pradesh. But had the Union Cabinet sent back the proposal, he would have been tied to accept the proposal because Article 74 mandates that. But by then, India's ruling dispensation has changed so much that regional parties or parties with regional base had participation in the Union government of 1996-98, that the proposals were not sent back. First time in the nation's history, proposals of the Union Cabinet for recommending President's rule were sent back by the President. That was again a federal landmark in the history of India. Now, in the book I have tried to divide the journey into 8 periods. You can periodize it in different ways. Nevertheless, our federal features were not put to test much in the first 15 years. Of course, aberrations like the dismissal of the communist government in Kerala and other things took place. But much of the problems within the union-state relationships were not attempted to be solved through constitutional means. If the union and the state has a problem, they could be resolved within the Congress party, which had a very dominant presence at that time. Almost all the states were ruled, and Nehru, being a towering personality, he could interact with B.C. Roy and Krishna Sahai of Bihar. All interstate disputes and disputes between union and the states were not to be resolved through constitutional means like forming interstate councils or through Article 131, but could be done through intra-party mechanisms. That was the situation. Right or wrong? I mean, there is no right or wrong there. Later on, the principles were first put to test in 1967 when in 8 states non-Congress parties formed the government. The role of the governor became a heated point of debate, and it continues till now. To summarize, the Indian Constitution retained the post of governor, which many did not want at that time, and also the discretionary powers of the governor. Whether governor should have discretionary powers or not, I am not going into the value judgment of that. But as Ambedkar and Alladi Krishnamaiah both had pointed out, the discretionary powers of the governor are very, very limited and within a narrow band by or under the Constitution and not otherwise. V.R. Krishnaiah, who wrote the judgment of Shamsher Singh versus Union of India, that's a classic piece of judgment which enunciates or which shows a graphic detail of the power of the governor in the Westminster system. Krishnaiah has written a book called Constitutional Miscellany, somewhere in the 80s. In that book, he says, to quote the riverine imagery, it is Thames that fertilizes the Yamuna and not the Potomac. So in a Westminster system, the appointed governor and his powers are limited and narrow. This is the held position of the Supreme Court. But the conflicts between governors and elected state governments are coming and escalating. You see in the neighboring Tamil Nadu. Sometimes you see here, sometimes you saw in West Bengal. I am not going into individual merits. Every governor is an honorable and a veteran person. But the point is, constitutional actors, if they abide by the spirit of the Constitutional Assembly debates, this will not happen. I will quote the example of bills passed by the Legislative Assembly. If a Legislative Assembly passes a bill, what's the next to be done? It goes to the governor for assent. If Parliament passes a bill, it goes to the President for assent. There are 3 things which a governor can do. President, of course, once or twice something has happened, I will come to that. Governor can either give assent to the bill, say, okay, he signs the bill, it becomes an act and becomes the law. Next thing governor can do is withhold the bill. Withhold is not holding back, okay. I also was confused. Withholding a bill means you kill the bill. If governor says, I withhold the bill, he has refused to assent the bill. The bill is once for all over. Number 3, what a governor can do is, he can reserve the bill for presidential assent. But Constitution's Article 200 second proviso explicitly states that only under conditions when the bill's provisions derogates from the power of the High Court. High Court അധികാരങ്ങൾ എന്തെങ്കിലും കടന്നുകയറ്റം ഉണ്ടെങ്കിലാണ് reservation is mandatory to the President. Now comes the question whether a bill passed by the Assembly can lie in the Raj Bhavan for a long time, indefinitely long time. Gajendra Gadkar, our Chief Justice, again in a Kerala case of Purushothaman Nambudiri versus State of Kerala, that was a land reforms case. The reference was not the time period of gubernatorial assent. The reference was only whether the government or the governor can hold back indefinitely. Gajendra Gadkar said that whenever the constitution wants to set a time limit, the time limit has been stated explicitly. But Punji Commission, Sarkaria Commission, they have said that 3 months or 6 months, it should not be unreasonably long. Now my point is, in the Constituent Assembly debates, as well as in the Constitutional Advisor's note to the Constituent Assembly, it has been clearly said that Article 200 is not a discretionary power. Article 200, a bill can be withheld only on the advice of a cabinet. Why a bill will be withheld? Suppose a government passes a bill, sends it for governor's assent. Benagal Narasimha Rao, B.N. Rao explicitly quotes this as an example. The government falls. Another government comes to power. Immediately in the indirect. That government may not like the bill to become a law. It will advise the governor, you withhold the bill or kill the bill. That times governor can do. But this is yet to be tested in any court of law. Whether Kerala government is going to test it or not, nobody knows. If it is tested, it will be a major case for an academic study. Rights and wrongs, I am not going. But President has also held back assent to a bill. The famous or infamous postal bill where during Rajiv Gandhi's time, the postal articles interception bill, Jnani Sailsing, he exercised a kind of veto called the pocket veto. There is an absolute veto. President or the governor can say no to a bill. That's withholding. There is a suspensive veto. He can send back the bill with a message stating that you consider these amendments and give back. Once the Assembly or Parliament does not consider, then the governor or the president is bound to give that. The governor is bound to give that assent. Third thing is the pocket veto. This is the worst kind of a veto. He can put it in his pocket and walk around. Nobody, no time limit, nothing. This is what we are all now bothering with. Postal bill, Honorable President Jnani Sailsing kept for 4 long years. It was President Venkatraman when VP Singh came to power sent back the bill, but VP Singh's government said we don't want to enact the bill. Number 2, the President killed a bill of increasing salaries to the members of parliament when Chandrasekhar government was on its last day of exit. He said that the bill has financial consequences and the bill was not piloted in the parliament. Bill was piloted in the parliament without the presidential assent. A permission is required. So on a procedural ground, he struck it down. Now, the important federal question here is a nominated governor withholding the bills passed by the assembly in Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, in Maharashtra, in Kerala, everywhere this problem is popping. So whether this is right or wrong, this is something which needs to be tested again. So Constituent Assembly envisaged federal principles while giving assent to the bills. They said the governor has no discretion. In Constituent Assembly debates, it was explicitly said that and in Article 200, the discretion is not mentioned. But discretion where discretion is not given is being exercised. Now, my concluding 2 points are whether we are federal or unitary. I am not going into the entire political scenario. Constitution has federal features but has unitary features. Supreme Court has eminently stated that our constitution is amphibian. During the emergency, it can be unitary. During normal circumstances, it can be federal, or even in normal circumstances, it can be unitary. Sarkaria Commission said that too much of unitarism is not good. Blood pressure at the center and anemia at the periphery. That's also not good. Veteran or first Prime Minister Nehru also said that we cannot have a unitary setup, but federalism tempered with this thing. Now, my doubt, which I pose before you again, is that why we had a very strong center, we came to accept a strong center and limited powers for the state is that the misery and violence associated with the partition, the bloodshed, that was the dominant atmosphere of fear psychosis that was there. Everyone supported a very strong center, rightly so, sometimes wrongly so, whatever. Now, very strong center to deal and put down and keep the country united. That was considered the requirement. Now, when much water has flown down the rivers, at times the cultural, linguistic and other minorities, the diversities and the plurality also will have to be preserved. For preserving that, is it good to give overarching powers to a center which is not manned by veterans of freedom movement any longer? In no party they are there. I mean, man is mortal and a human being is mortal, they cannot live forever. So at this point of time, to preserve the unity and integrity of the country is a federal system much more suited than more overarching powers to the center. Of course, center should have certain overarching powers to maintain unity and other things, but federalism, is it not the best insurance for maintaining cultural, linguistic and other diversities? Number two, whether checks and balances are enough to ensure a federal setup. Judiciary intervened twice in the case of Delhi Lieutenant Governor's case. They said that the governor has to act in accordance with the advice of the elected ministry, and Article 239A, the wording they interpreted. The constitution was amended. When S.R. Bomai's judgment came, when President returned the proposals, the Union government was tempered enough not to send back the proposal. Both the NDA and the United Front, they did not send back the proposals. Now, when a constitution is interpreted on control of civil services also by the Delhi government, it gets amended through the ordinance, and now it is going to be tested in the parliament and the constitution benches. So, how much effective are the checks and balances? So, I will not go into the question whether India is federal or unitary. I mean, that's a meaningless question because India has many federal features, overarching unitary features. Many times the federal features are an expedient, and many times union features are also an expedient. After all, we are not an indestructible units which have formed the union. States can be formed even without the consent of the state assembly. You know, the Andhra bifurcation. We are not following the Philadelphia Convention, and confederating states came together to form a union. But to have a clean political and economic laboratory where every tier can learn from one another, we need to have empowered local bodies, satisfied state governments and a strong center. It's easier said than done. As Mahatma Gandhi said and Sriman Narayan said in his Gandhian Constitution for a Free India, we should not have a pyramidal structure, we should have concentric circles. One circle's jurisdiction or the circumference is lesser than the other circle, but no circle is inferior to the other. States should realize that more than the center, because insofar as treating local bodies, many times they treat it as agencies. So we cannot blame center unilaterally, we have to take the blame, and all these empowered local bodies, satisfied states and a strong union. This will be the federalism which we envisage for a very strong nation. This is my view, you can debate. I stop here and leave it for discussion. Thank you. Questions and criticism have to be there, otherwise the job is a waste.
Good afternoon. Myself, Dr. Jiniman, faculty of this department. First of all, I would like to congratulate Professor Dr. Yeshaji for conducting such a took initiative in connection with a topic the students of history are not regularly discussing. Here we have Mohan, one of the senior officer in central government service and academician, has made a very good presentation regarding the federalism and its 7 decades of experience. Once Professor Michael Tharagan sir, we discussed the matter, and sir told me that if there is any chance to discuss the content of the work, he rightly pointed out that it is a very significant work in this regard. And I made contact with our head of the department, and he is very happy to hear this, and he made all necessary arrangements to materialize this function. So it is a very significant topic, not only to the students of history, but the citizens of India facing certain confusions, certain dilemmas in relations with the central government and state government. The central state relationship is every time, most often in a critical juncture, is a matter of dispute among the scholars, academicians, and politicians. Sir is rightly pointed out that we are not in a position to reach into a conclusion that is it a federal form of state or it a unitary state, or in between these two system of existence. Sometimes we can see the overwhelming power of the center, and they try to exercise their powers to intervene in the affairs of state policies and the government. Many times it became relevant and became a matter of discussion. In the case of the events that happening in Northeast and the problems of sectarian political movements that emerged in Punjab, and in the case of the sharing of revenue, GST portion to the government and central, the share to the state government, and the time of the excessive power enjoyed by the central government through the constitutional ways. As we can say, it is a constitutional way through the governors into the internal affairs of the state. We are the witness of that incident. As is rightly pointed out, in Kerala, the conflict and the difference of opinion regarding our governor and the state government. In Tamil Nadu, we can see certain incidents. In West Bengal, also we can see, except the NDA government-led government states in India, we can see certain problems or confusions or many other types of irregularities can be seen. In that sense, what is the real nature of interference that came into existence in the political discourses in terms of governance, in terms of the administrative system and its reciprocal relationship. It is primarily, I think, related with the reciprocal relationship with the center and state governments. And it cannot be limited. The state list or union list and the concurrent lists are there. Above all this listing, the priority of the government and the political economy of the government to a great extent positively or negatively interfere in the matters of the state. And the state, whenever the state government is trying to make more and more restrictions upon the state programs, state policies, we can see the oppositions and other type of formation of the public opinion against this federal form of state and administration. In this regard, I would like to having to see Justice, sir, I just gone through your book. Here the problem is related with. I think you will taken into consideration of the concept of nation and the nation state. What we cannot, while the debate is related with what is a nation and what kind of nation we have tried to put into practice. When the people who live in different caste, regions and regional variations are there. Even people live in faraway places, the Malayalis, Bengalis, Punjabis, Kashmiris, etc. We cannot share everything for us. But we are to a great extent imagining us Indians on the basis of certain cultural heritage and certain many other things are there in the nationalist imagination. This nationalist imagination, and I think Shashi Tharoor rightly pointed out in his India from midnight to millennium. Not only Shashi Tharoor, from Jawaharlal Nehru, Discovery of India, and many other works rightly point out the cultural diversity and the regional disparity in case of economy and the political well-being, etc. And in that sense, the historians like Bipin Chandra point out that India is not a nation. It is a process process of nation in the making. We are not reached into the actual or potential nation, but we want to become a nation. And in this process, I think the authorities or the persons who actively intervened in the framing of Indian Constitution rightly grasped the spirit of this nature of Indian nation, tried to incorporate and formulated such a kind of constitution amidst federal, unitary or such other things. Anyway, thank you very much.
Are you answer each question separately or together? Together, okay. So after hearing the presentations of the speaker and as well as the work that he has written that I have gone through, a glance at the view I have made not on elaborately, I have read it, but I have tried it to attempted to read it back. From this, what I surmise is that our system is, of course, now also in a budding stage. Not we can't say that even after the independence we have gone through this much years, but experimentation and innovations are going on. It is a test of time that we have to finalize whether unitary features are more successful or federal features are successful. See if it is, are it be convenient for us to take it as an experimentation? This federal system itself is an experimentation, especially thinking the unity and diversity of the nation. That's of course the key factor of our nation, where so many ethnic groups are there, castes are there, and it's also already been pointed out. How can we make this nation simply a unitary one without having such a kind of federal structure and powerful center? Suppose if there is no federal structure, if there is no central power, concentration of power, not I'm meaning concentration of power, but at times when there is some clashes or some issues will come out, there should be a strong center. That strong center has been lacked by the country during the historical times. The very factor that contributed for the British hegemony or the European hegemony itself is the lack of centralization, the unitary systems. So we are trying to establish a centralized system with some federal features and giving powers to decentralizing the power to the states at the same time. This is of course an experimentation. What I feel is that this experimentation was done during the time of the constitution making, during the time of the independence. Through the discussion and answer dialogues which has been done, there were compromises. It was through the compromises that this has happened. Same is the case with the compromise that we have done with that of the mixed economy. Same is the case with the compromises that we had, the Jawaharlal Nehru once upon a puts it that we will continue in the British Commonwealth. And the same fact that we are, of course, the colonies of the British government for a long span of time, but we continue as a member of the British Commonwealth for the greater interest of the nation. It was in the greater interest of the nation that we started non-alignment movement, not aligning with either the power blocks. Such kind of situation was there when we formed this kind of federal system. This is a test of time. It is we people to decide whether this federal structure is, of course, good enough or whether it is certain changes are there. So I remember during the time of the Vajpayee government was in power, there were some talks, even in media, some talks started whether we should experiment a presidential form of government instead of a parliamentary form of government. That doesn't happen, but such kind of talks were there. There is possibility, there is enough space for rethinking as well. Okay, sir. This is my suggestion.
Just
We'll take more questions, but these two I will not as a response from some comments and submissions. Sir has taken us to a very larger question of the nation state, etc. Into which I am not a big expert. I don't have elementary knowledge. Actually, our constitutional process took its root from the spirit of the national movement. And if we look from the days of East India Company, 1784, the Pitt's India Act, and 1833, till 1833, Calcutta, Madras, Bombay, they were distinct. And governors of Bombay and Madras also had distinct separate powers. Slowly from 1833 and in 1858, the Governor General, when he came at Calcutta, and governors became subordinate. It is a very nice story. Even in Cambridge Economic History, Dharmakumar has also mentioned. Many of these governors of Bombay and Madras, they resented. During the British system, which was highly centralized, there were pulls for decentralization. Lord Mayo in 1870, Lord Ripon in 1883. And slowly, when the government could not manage its deficits, they want to push certain expenditure to the provinces for economic reasons and otherwise. So even before independence, this counter pressures against centralization was there from the colonial administrators, within colonial administrators themselves. It was not a national interest or anything. But when the national movement became a mass movement, the concept of India that became broad-based was also a plural concept. In 1920s Nagpur session, the Congress party recognized, the National Congress recognized linguistic basis for units. Kerala Pradesh Congress Committee was there. British administrative units were not the basis for the provincial Congress committees, but linguistic basis. Later, a diversity was recognized, but nation building was also done. This was a very unique case of a nation building through a long drawn national movement, fighting the British imperialism, through constructive work, through propagation of trying to propagate a linked language, at the same time respecting the languages of each province. I mean, no linked language was sought to be imposed. Hindi learning was there, but linguistic rights of provinces were respected. But when we became independent, the linguistic provinces did not come as a matter of course. Our founding fathers and the framers of Constitution felt that this can also lead to certain visiparous tendencies. Ambedkar had divided views on that. So our nation building was on the concept of nation, a national spirit, recognizing the plural identities, the diversities, the linguistic diversities, the asymmetries that existed. Our debate on separate electorates itself is recognizing the social asymmetries. You know this Ramsay MacDonald Award or the Communal Award, when Pune Pact, when Gandhi went on a fast and to death and Dr. Ambedkar protested that the scheduled depressed classes should have separate electorates. Even today, who was right is a debate, because many people feel Gandhi was wrong. Our Dalit activists say that Gandhi was wrong. Ambedkar also felt that he was coerced. Diverse identities fought for the recognition, but also there was an unifying God. Our Constituent Assembly's 1946-49 was a marvelous exercise on building this unity. But later on, when the Constitution has been put to practice, the intrusions and weakening of checks and balances have led to aberrations. Internal emergency, overuse of Article 356, etc. You cannot blame the Constitution for that. However golden a Constitution is, it is the people who work it can make it or mar it. This was the crux of the last day's debate on the Constituent Assembly. So, whether power distribution is lopsided or not, time and experiences will tell. But a nation and a nationhood, as the Constitution envisaged, recognized diversities. But when at a point of time when diversities are itself considered something to be homogenized, Is federalism an insurance? That is another question. Now, as Sir has asked another pertinent question whether a presidential thing also can be experimented. But here the question of basic structure comes into being. We are a parliamentary democracy, a Westminster democracy, and parliamentary democracy, if I am not mistaken, is the basic structure of the constitution. Federalism, as S.R. Bommai's case say, is also a basic structure of the constitution. How far we should be federal, there is no answer, because there is no tight answer for federalism. We talk of cooperative federalism. What exactly is cooperative federalism? Cooperative federalism is a compromise federalism when the center does not know everything, the states do not know everything. There is a compromise in which they decide by consensus. Many times a consensus between the weak and the strong become coercion. That is where you see symptoms of coercion also coming into cooperative federalism. Supreme Court said recently in the case of Mohit Minerals through the director, it is a GST case, they said that there can be uncooperative federalism also. In democracy, contestation is as important as cooperation. D.Y. Chandrachud, Honorable Chief Justice, he is the author of the judgment. Sometimes in the US context, the states refuse to work the union laws and record protest. But in India, whether it is possible, I do not know. Because the constitution, the state administration itself can be taken over. But the CAA, I am not in the politics of that. Some of the state governments like West Bengal, Tamil Nadu and Kerala decided that we will not conduct this citizenship, that registry check. That was another case of a contestation instead of cooperation. How far it can go is very difficult to say. But in the Indian context, whether a presidential system is really workable, I do not approve of that, but it can be debated. But in a parliamentary democracy where every state and every ethnic, religious and every cultural group gets a representation seems to be more suited. As Krishna has said, it is Thames which fertilizes the Yamuna and not the Potomac. But here, the point is, at a time when Pisiparous tendencies come to the fore and there is no intervention, people are forced to think of drastic alternatives in desperate situations. And desperate situations, drastic alternatives may not always be feasible and sustainable. This again is an experimentation.
Good morning, one and all. Myself Ashwini Babu, Research Scholar, Department of History, University College. Sir, first thing, we have a number of, there are a lot of judgments made by the Supreme Court on cases like State of Rajasthan versus Union of India, Keshavananda Bharati case, and S.R. Bommai versus Union of India. And recently Lakshmi Narayan versus Union of India. And in most of the cases, the Supreme Court had made different judgments on the center-state relation, whether it is federal or unitary. And from many instances, we can find that India has a unitary nature to an extent. And what is your take on it? And another thing, do you think the FRBM Act is a possible problem in the center-state relation? Thank you.
Two very valid and thought-provoking questions. I am not phrasing, but these are. How has Supreme Court interpreted the Indian Constitution? Coming to state of Rajasthan, the political background, you are aware. When in the 1977 elections held after the emergency, in north of India, the then ruling Congress party was routed In UP, Bihar, there did not win a single seat. In Madhya Pradesh, as one seat. Janata Party, which was at that time formed under the inspiring leadership of late Jayaprakash Narayan, freedom fighter, won a massive, not a massive majority, with allies it won a 2/3 majority, an absolute majority. So most of their leaders were in prison, they came out and became the administrators. At that point of time, Chaudhary Charan Singh, the Home Minister, and Shanti Bhushan, the Law Minister, counseled the Congress states that you have lost the confidence of the people, kindly go and seek a mandate. That's a very unique circumstance. Most of the Congress governments had outlived their 5-year tenure. 42nd Amendment during the emergency had extended the life of the assemblies and parliament to 6 years. They were into their 6th years. Normally one would have expected them to resign and go, but somehow they did not. The president dismissed them. But that was not a very simple dismissal. B.D. Jetty was earlier the Chief Minister of Mysore, a Congress leader, was acting president after Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad had passed away. There was 48 hours of uncertainty in Delhi when B.D. Jetty held the presidential advice for the cabinet to declare president's rule in 9 states. Ultimately, the Morarji Desai government Morarji Desai threatened that I will resign and seek a fresh mandate. And finally, B.D. Jetty yielded. So the Rajasthan case was the case against the dismissal of the 9 state governments. The Supreme Court did not give relief in that case. Maybe the prevailing political climate also might be there. But the important thing Supreme Court said is that our constitution is amphibian. It can be unitary in times of emergency and federal at other times. It also said that more and more demands for economic planning and welfare makes our state more centralized. Now come to S.R. Bommai. S.R. Bommai, federalism is recognized as one of the basic features of the constitution, basic structure of the constitution. It curtails the unbridled power to dismiss state governments, unbridled power to state that a government has lost its majority without testing in the legislature. Previously, the Andhra incident when NTR was dismissed when still had a majority is there. So this is an important fact. Both these cases are federal landmarks. The latest case which mentioned that contestation is also part of cooperative federalism is another federal landmark. The worst unitary landmark judgment which I would like to add is the Shivakanta Shukla versus ADM Jabalpur. During the emergency, when Supreme Court said that an emergency is prevailing, even a citizen's right to life and liberty cannot be guaranteed. H.R. Khanna was dissenting. A drunken constable shooting dead a citizen on the road. Can this court guarantee? No during an emergency. That was an answer by Nirande, the then Attorney General. H.R. Khanna dissented. He paid with his Chief Justiceship for that. Keshavanda Bharati is another landmark for federalism because it curtailed the unbridled power to amend and repeal the constitution. Amending power is not a destruction power. Basic structure has to be preserved. What is basic structure? It is enumerated. Another important thing which I would add here is the Minerva Mills after Keshavanda Bharati. After Keshavanda Bharati, during the emergency, they said that any provision of the constitution can be amended or repealed and President has to accept it. But in Minerva Mills, they held these provisions as invalid. Vaman Rao case is also there. Supreme Court has substantially upheld the federal features of the constitution. Our constitution is never unitary. If it goes to unitary, it springs back from the unitary system because emergency powers are limited, as Charles Henry Alexandrovich also said. By far, Supreme Court and judicial interventions, according to me, has preserved the little federal features we have from emasculation or encapsulation. This is my view. Now come to FRBM. India's polity should have become vastly more federal since 1989-2014 when the 25-year-long period there was no single party majority at the center. We should have had a silver jubilee of federalism in 2014. Did we have that? When politically the dominance went for a 6 and coalition government started coming to power at the center, to quote Shashi Tharoor, state started warning the center in 1960s. 96 to 98, because most of the parties at the states, they were also dominant in the center. Telugu Desam, the Dravida Munnetra Kazhagam, the Samajwadi parties. I mean, states were owning the center. Did we become more and more federal at that time? No. The centralization process started coming through a different route. That is where the FRBM comes, uniform deficit targets, uniform tax rates with the consent of the states. That came. So when politically the centralism started developing cracks, but democracy still being preserved and unity still being preserved, centralization started coming through the fiscal route. Post 2014, there is centralization from both the routes. FRBM is definitely a move towards the unitary route, through the unitary system through the fiscal route. Or it's a counter-federal tendency, let me rephrase it that way. Because every state should have a uniform deficit target. Why should Maharashtra and Kerala have uniform deficit target? Why should Tamil Nadu and Uttar Pradesh have a uniform fiscal deficit target? Can't it be different according to the fiscal situation of the state? If a state is fiscally fragile or fiscally strong. Why this has not been thought about? Punji Commission explicitly and elaborately debated on this. Unfortunately, Punji Commission, a very well-written report in 2008, has never become a subject of debate in the academic circles at all. Sarkaria Commission report generated so much enthusiasm. Punji Commission report just went into the shelves of the Home Ministry and nowhere debated. So through the fiscal route, the counter-federal tendencies are developing. As you asked the question, my answer is yes. It is towards a unitary tendency that we moved in the fiscal regime. GST is also a move like that. Good or bad, history is the best judge, but it is a counter-federal tendency, no doubt.
Good morning, all of you. Myself, Priyamvada. I am a research scholar in Iqbal College. So, my doubt is regarding the article first of the Constitution itself states that India, that is Bharat, is a union of state rather than a federal setup. So maybe the Constitution is trying to put on idea is that center should be more strong and the state less powerful. Because of the, we can see that many examples like All India Services, statutory commissions, constitution bodies, and emergency provisions, appointment of the governor, we can see this express that center is more powerful. But as far as concerned, the South Indian states like Kerala and Tamil Nadu, Karnataka have a different kind of the language system, and with regards to with respect to the North Indian states like Assam and like something like that, have a different kind of culture and ethnicity with comparing to the North Indian states. But as a representative of South Indian state, my question is that how can you suggest that we can balance the federal system? How can we balance it then? Actually, it was in theory, in practice. We can see India, we know that India is not a unique state having the federal setup. Many countries have such kind of things are there. But with respect to the US concept, there is ideology that indestructible state with indestructible union. But with respect to India, it is indestructible union with a descriptible state. So with the assimilation of the Kashmir within one day is also shocked as a state. So we are also fearful what is actually happening here. So as an author, how can you suggest what are the reforms for the balancing such kind of the federal setup in India? That's my question, sir. Thank you so much.
We are a union of states, undoubtedly, yes. But although not mentioned as a federal state, federal features do form a part of the basic structure of the constitution. Now the point is how to balance the diverse features which come. Diversity is always not a problem. It can be a boon as well. To balance the diversities, there has to be recognition that power should not be concentrated on any one tier of the government. Local governments should be empowered. To have a check on the elite capture and the local dominance of the majority on the vulnerable minority, the state has to keep a watchful eye. For the same thing, the center has to keep a watchful eye. Now come to the diverse interests between Tamil Nadu, Kerala, Assam, etc. This is where a strong center, the need for that comes into the picture. It is a unifier, it is a glue where Fissiparous tendencies have to be tempered down and simmering tendencies have to be kept under the waves, and finally a unity has to be maintained. Center has a coordinating role as well as a role where discussions and discourses should be there through between the states. Now coming to the Philadelphia Convention, US was uniting confederate states. There was huge debate whether a federation should be there or not, Virginia coming on one side, but they were unilingual, not culturally very different. The issues were only the taxation issues, their rights, etc., etc. Canada has some issues. Yugoslavia was one country which became a federation but which fell apart. It's a failed example. We are almost a successful example with problems. I will not say we are a failed example. Federalism, recognition of languages in the 8th schedule, these are all guarantees our constitution has given. Our constitution, of course, as you said rightly, is lopsided in favor of the union for ever so many reasons existing at that time. But the political actors or the constitutional actors or the institutions, the executive, legislature and judiciary at the union and the state level, their actions can go a long way in maintaining and strengthening the unity. Our constitution has laid immense faith on governors to act as sentinel of the constitution. Many times it did not happen. In Andhra of 84, 88 in Karnataka, in many places in 1967, sometimes in the 50s. Governor's power of discretion or governor's satisfaction should not be the ruling party's satisfaction, but the constitutional satisfaction of the governor. Many times it did not become a reality. This is a case where constitutional functionaries have not risen to the expectation of the Constituent Assembly. Likewise, the interstate councils, the debates, how to solve the disputes between states, it has not become an active thing at all. The Finance Commission transfers and grants, how to eliminate the discretionary part and make more grants formula based, this has not been given a very serious thought. So while making the constitution work, you can rout off a lot of rough edges which arises from the lopsidedness of the power structure to the union, which came due to historical reasons and otherwise. So while working the constitution, I think we have to work more meaningfully. This is my response, maybe it partially answers you.
Sir, so myself Shyamli, second semester student in this department. So I'm asking your opinion about the federal setup during Manipur issue.
This is a very valid question, but I do not have an answer for that. See, why we all rooted for a strong center. We the people of India, not we sitting here. We the people of India in the constitution rooted for a strong union. The underlying reason was that the Fissiparous tendencies should be put down. When the local passions run high, there should be a central intervention. Now, when Kuki, Meiti and other internal problems are there, my personal view, it is my own personal view that it is a case for central intervention. or at least a political intervention to calm down the tempers. This is a very fit case for a central intervention. When a large-scale violence, as people say, as experts in the field have said, no ethnic or communal violence can last for more than a day if there is a political will to put it down. Here is whether there is political will or not. I am not criticizing any political party or otherwise, but this, according to me, according to my own personal submission, is a fit case for central intervention. If this is not the case, like L.K. Advani said in 1998 when K.R. Narayanan returned the Article 356 proposal in Bihar, he says if it cannot be imposed in Bihar at this moment, it has no right to be on the statute book. If an Article 356 or even some directives under 256 or 256 cannot go, why at all they should be there? This is my question that is bothering me.
Good afternoon, everyone. So myself, Libina. I'm a research scholar in this department. So I have concerns and doubts more than questions. Correct me if I'm wrong. Yes. So my question is, do politics play a part in this India being a federal setup? Because when we look up to the budgets, Kerala is being neglected by getting this IITs and IIMs. So that's my first concern. And how can we balance this checks, this turmoils, this tensions, this anarchies, which is now going on around in India, which gone around India, like there are separate demands for states like Khalistan and separate entities they are asking for, because India, as Dr. P. Jinamon pointed out, India as a nation is a question. The kind of nation India is, its multicultural aspects is a question. So how can we check these balances into control? Because center is more powerful. See, it's not in the Nehruvian era. India has a different phase in its foreign policy, and the center is getting strong, and they have been giving the coercions, and they are admitting their power in controlling the rebels and resistance that happens in India. So how can we pacify these separate entity things, separate autonomy things that we are facing right now? And you also said about the disbursement of revenue to the states, but when we give the financial autonomy to a state, because states are demanding this financial, linguistics and cultural autonomies nowadays, so will it give way for a separate nation or a separate state? So will it be a concern, a question for the nation as we live in? So that's it. Thank you.
At the outset, I think it is my personal view that we are nowhere near a breaking point. We are a very strong nation. This is my belief. So, madam asked me whether politics plays a part. It plays the whole part. I do not consider politics in a democracy as a bad thing. What is the problem here is that when constitutional functionaries in the executive, at the union or at the states, forget certain responsibilities and become partisan, the trouble starts. Now the problem is, one state feels neglected, that it's not getting sufficient central sector projects. Post-liberalization, I think this is not a very big question, but AIMS, IIT, this what is that, Palakkad coach factory, the Neamam coaching terminal, I mean, you can have ever so many things each state has got. Now the problem is, our constitution has the mechanism of finance commission to disburse grants, tax devolution apart, it's formula based. It should be a neutral system when states in need, their need is assessed and grants are given. Unfortunately, what is the scenario today? 80% 80% of the grants are given as discretionary grants and only 20% through Finance Commission. This is as on 2020. Might have taken a different turn in the next 2-3 years. But situation cannot have been drastic. There cannot be a drastic turnaround. When discretionary grants take a major share, partisan politics does come into play. When Karnataka election was due, a 5,300 crore was declared. A state-specific package is declared. These are things which a union government should desist from. Also, a state in its budget should desist from packages, genuine packages for very backward regions is okay. Disfavoring and favoring due to partisan reasons do undo our federal balancing structure and create imbalances and give rise to demands, as you said, of Khalistan. Khalistan, the Ravi Bias water sharing. Punjabi Suba agitation and Punjabi speaking state was given in 1966. Finally, for economic and other reasons, a separatist movement was made. I mean, it had very derogatory reasons. I mean, the fight with Nirangaris and other things. I'm not going into that. But the point is, an anti-national or a separatist demand cannot be very vibrant in a country like India. You can have certain troubles coming out, which itself is not very good. Our inherent strength and values of the freedom movement are so strong that we as a nation will survive. But the point is, in disbursement of revenues, in grants, etc., too much of discretionary power, using budget to disburse favors to favored states, election going states, their own states, backyard states, etc., definitely going to what to say, to imbalance the delicate balancing. The political actors can make or mar the constitution. Many times they have made, more times they have marred. These are the examples of marring. Examples of marring cannot destabilize the nation, but they can leave marks of deep discontent, which is not good.
Good afternoon to everyone. My name is Jamal Nasser Koistani. I'm from research scholar from Department of Political Science. Actually, I have one question. It is not regarding India. I don't have so much information about India. However, I should have, but it will take much more time for me. But in case of Afghanistan, sir, if we consider Afghanistan and its problems from two aspects, external and internal aspects, our external problems comes from, of course, from the competition of superpowers, which at part of the history they were keeping this state as a buffer state, and sometimes they keep this place for their proxy wars and extracting resources and several other issues. But part of our internal problems, some of our scholars believe that it comes from it's a kind of ethnic problems, and they believe that it's one tribe, which is Pashtun tribe, trying to keep this country a centralized kind of government in Afghanistan always, and they are always against this federal setup or any other kind of decentralized system in Afghanistan. So my question is that how do you recommend this federal system as a solution for countries like Afghanistan, which have passed 40 years of conflict? They are not stable, but the real internal problems come from ethnicity issues. So in such kind of states, how do you recommend this federalism? How much is it is responsive, and what are the threats, what are the merits and demerits? I want your view. Thank you, sir.
frankly speaking, my apologies to you because I really do not know anything about Afghanistan's ground realities. Only thing we have heard about Afghanistan is that two things was that in 1879 this Afghan wars were there. India government went into a huge deficit at that time. Lord Ripon and all, they wanted to decentralize a little power. That was one partisan reason the British had. Later on in 1979, when Kerala, Afghanistan was celebrated as a communist state, later on when that experiment failed and the president was hung openly on the road. I mean, these are tidbits of information which I have on Afghanistan. Let me try to look at it through the Sri Lankan experience, of which I have heard a little bit more. The 13th Amendment, which I think was part of the Indo-Sri Lankan Accord, and it was the Tamil demand for a separate state, Velupula Prabhakaran, CTT and all these things, and Sinhalese unitary state. To the 13th Amendment, some powers were to be devolved to the states, and that was how the federal system was supposed to cool down the heated ethnic divide. Even today, public order, law and order, etc., has not been given to the Tamil area. So, India at that time viewed that a little more devolution of powers or distribution of powers can cool down the ethnic tempers, and they can exist together as a nation. It can be a glue. It can be a unifying factor. Same thing when Cabinet Mission envisaged for India that a loose federation with more powers to the states and a center having military powers can be a unifying factor. But when there is an irreconcilable ethnic problem, unitary system can be a little dangerous. I am not saying about Afghanistan specifically because I think it's a little dangerous because in the unitary system itself, the dominant ethnic majority mans the country. Where is the minority there? This can be a major problem. So at that point of time, a wider distribution of powers and ensuring that each ethnic minority or places where regions where ethnic minorities are also concentrated get certain rights ensured through constitution will be a safer option. Which one your country will take, I really do not know because I don't know the ground reality, but constitutionally defined powers for the units in ethnically diverse countries can always be an insurance against balkanization kind of a thing. This is what I feel. I could be wrong. You can ask from there also because people can hear or come.
Yes. Let me sit here. Very good afternoon, sir. Actually, we enjoyed from your presentation, and also we hope we get opportunity to have your wonderful book. I'm also Rizal Rafat from Afghanistan, research scholar in the Department of Political Science. I have a small question. Maybe it is related or not. Sir, I had the opportunity to be in the north part of India for 2 years, especially in Punjab, in Chandigarh. Whenever you are there and you are speaking about the system of governance, the people prefer to define the system of governance as semi-unitary. So, it is something the narrative of the people and the academicians. Especially when I was in Punjab University, our teachers most usually were speaking about India as semi-unitary, and the tendency was somehow to define India as kind of unitary state. But the narratives in the south, especially in Kerala, it is it's somehow different. For example, your title of book is India's Federalist Setup. So this means somehow explain that you have some tendency on defining the India as kind of federal state. And also, it is not the same of this. It is not the case of this wonderful book. But whenever we are here in the university, most of the time the tendency is toward the defining India as a federal. So I can see some differentiation between the perspective from the south and the north. The north people, as I mentioned, they are trying to define the India as a semi-unitary. But here, the people try to define the India as a kind of semi-federal. I don't know what is the differentiation, and I don't know what this idea comes from. If it is relevant, this is my perspective and this is my understanding, sir.
To tell you very frankly, I have learned something from you today. Because the northern states or the northwestern states and the south view India's federal or unitary or the Indian polity differently. Now this has to set, this is a question to be addressed. I don't know. Standing on my feet, I am just thinking, because Punjab would have felt India is more and more unitary because Punjab and Haryana were united after the linguistic reorganization of states, and after much of a debate and agitations, Punjabi speaking Punjab was established in 1966. Kerala, Andhra, other places, the linguistic reorganization came rather easily. And after that, I think Punjab as a state had economic grievances in the sense that their farmers had grievances. Others felt that Punjab was more than favored. I mean, there were so many reasons could be there. And during the emergency also, Punjab was very strongly protesting against the day-to-day protests were there in the Punjab state. So maybe their sense of pride and other things operates much more strongly. I mean, these are not answers. I'm just thinking. Now, if you ask me whether India is unitary, it's not a unitary state. No doubt it is not unitary. It has very strong unitary tendencies which spring up and become overarching during an emergency. Whether it is federal, yes, not the type-mold federalism as the US Constitution, not as unitary as the British Constitution, not as federal as the Australian Constitution, but it is unitarism sprinkled all over an underlying federal setup. We have recognized states not as indestructible states. That's one federalism sprinkled there. We have recognized separate state governments, but we have sprinkled the Article 356 on that. You have put Finance Commission Article 280, you have sprinkled some unilateralism there. But you can find unitarism streaking all over a federal setup. How to make these tweaks little more irrelevant and have a better federal system which can strengthen the unity. At the same time, separatist tendencies do not come. Semi-unitary, I do not agree. Semi-federal, I do not agree. I feel that we are having features, how to put it, I don't know. We are having features of federalism which can be masked by unitarism at times of emergency, or even during normal times by the political actors. So our federalism is not a well-defined silo-protected system, but federal features are there, which can always be overtaken by the unitary features. Best thing is KC Weir's quasi-federal. I think we cannot succinctly put more than that. Thank you. I think I have confused you more. You have something to say? Yes. You will take it and quickly take us the last one. The question should never be finished.
So myself, Srihari, student of first year PG. Sir, I think there has been an increasing support in the mind of people towards a unitary form of government. If you see, BJP is using a manifesto of double engine government, a government which is in central BJP, which supports in coordination with the state government. I think in subordination of the central government. And when we see Article 370 was removed, and the people all over have celebrated that thing, though it has been removed in a single day. So I think in the mind of people, support towards a unitary form of government is increasing day by day. If you see China is a simple example of a unitary government. There is no federalism there. No federalism means federalism to a very less amount. So my question is there is a tendency towards a unitary form of government increasing in the mind of people? We can see increasing support there.
A quick answer to this, I think time is running out. He has raised a very valid question whether this double engine, though the word I don't know, it's not a new invention. The Mexican system, which was federal, the PT, I don't know the expansion of it, it was a long dominant ruling party. So the campaign was that the local units should also elect the ruling party so that they get a preference. Even during the 1960s, 70s and 80s, we have heard this, not in so many words. In economics, we call it tragic brilliance. A diverse democracy is getting marked that you should not vote the opposition and you should not experiment more and you should vote that only. So now the word double engine has come. But insofar as whether people have accepted it, I do not know. Karnataka did not work. It did not work in Himachal Pradesh. It may work in some other place. I really don't know. But the double engine also depends on the second tire of the engine, how much effectively it functions. But if the top engine can decide that only if the second engine will function because of its existence, we have not come to that path. Because even today our finance commission's recommendations are accepted. Kerala has got some 50,000 crores grants without giving BJP a single seat. So people are supporting double engine and a unitary system. India has not come to that path. I think in 15, 16 states in India we are having opposition governments. Not the government, which is the ruling party at the center. And Prime Minister is also talking of cooperative federalism. If you see the Jansang of 1967, they said that India should be made a unitary state when Deen Dayal Upadhyaya's idea was there. Now today, in BJP's manifesto, you will not find unitary state. States like China, which are not open democracies like India, they have much more unitary tendencies. But world over, if you see the Oxford Journal Publius, you can have it in the Oxford Publius, the Journal of Federalism. All over the world, including the US, the tendencies of centralization are gathering momentum in the last 30-40 years. Australia, everywhere. So India also experiences that. People have not completely supported the unitary system. This is my take on it.
Good afternoon, all of you. Today we have a very interesting and very fruitful discussion regarding a practitioner of social science who has made experienced his researches not as a research scholar but as a civil servant, accumulated knowledge through his understanding and experience. On the basis of this experience, he has written a work named India's Federal Setup, a journey through 7 decades. And the discussion opened a new experience among the students of history and the students and teachers from various other departments. And we are enlightened with the nuances in the ideas and the factors and forces that work behind the existence of a nation as such, India as a nation. And finally, sir rightly conclude that I read it. The ambition to become a unitary nation is a signal and a symbol of despotic rule. I think it will pave the way into the invalidation of our constitutional legacies and the constitutional existence of constitution on the basis of democracy, secularism, and the highlighted mottos of Indian constitution. Anyway, first of all, I would like to congratulate and get across thanks on behalf of the department and my own behalf, Sri R. Mohan sir, for his kind presence and for in this purpose, I like to get across my sincere gratitude and thanks to Dr. Professor A. Shaji sir, our head of the department, who is very energetic and enthusiastic in the conduct of various academic programs, including seminars and discussions and many other things. It is able to enrich the students and made more space to academic debates in our department, and it is to become a very significant in that the students from various departments and various centers, research centers is gathered here in these activities. Anyway, thank you very much, sir. And I would like to say thanks to Abhi T. Suresh and Assistant Professor of the Department of Political Science, and Dr. Sajana, the faculty member of our department, and the research scholars from political science, and who very actively participated in the discussions, and the students from PG, postgraduate, first, second, and fourth semester students, research scholars. Thank you very much.